Hey everybody in YouTube land. Today I'd like to talk about living off grid. Now there are so many people that have made a ton of money on YouTube talking about their off-grid living experience. And the better part of them, they all have money. They all have a new truck of some sort or SUV. They're all relatively young. They apparently have some money. And most of them are married couples. But without all the apparatuses that are available today for living off-grid, I wonder how many of those people could actually live off-grid for any length of time with only the bare necessities. This tent here, right now, the measurement on it is 10 by 20, but I had another section on it that made it 20 by 20, and this is what I lived in for over 8 years here. And when I first came to Hawaii, I lived on a different property. For the first 3 years, I lived at a rental property, and so I got to know a tiny bit about living off-grid because for the house that I rented was off-grid. At that time, there were actually no power poles up in most of the subdivisions in Puna. And so you really were off-grid. But it was a house that had solar. It had Trojan 6-volt batteries, and it had a propane refrigerator and a 12-volt pump, blah, blah, blah. But I lived there for 3 years, and then I decided that I wanted to try to get my own place, so I did. I came out here, and my very first place that I built was, I got an idea from an orchid book from Australia, and I bought myself a roll of concrete mesh, and I had some 20-foot aluminum girders that I got from somewhere. So I just built me a little frame and made it like a Quonset hut greenhouse, and I lived in there for quite some time. And I had a Coleman triple burner stove. I had two 55-gallon drums set up on top of two metal 55-gallon drums, and I had a water spigot put in the bottom of them so I could drain the water. If I wanted to take a bath, this was my bathtub. I would take me a big pot of water and put it on the 3-burner Coleman stove and heat that up and put it in my bath water here. And then while I was taking a bath, I would put another pot of water on the stove and let it start heating up for my rinse water. My toilet for well over 8 years was a 5-gallon bucket, and I had a little thing like that for a sink for the longest time. And when I moved to Hawaii over 40 years ago, it wouldn't have made any difference. We didn't have YouTube at that time or anything else, and I have never lived with anybody, and so I was always by myself, so the only person I had to rely on was myself. But fortunately, God gave me a little piece of an IQ, and I put it to good use. Also gave me a strong back and arms and legs, and unbeknownst to several people who've ever watched any of my videos, I didn't have any off-grid experience before I came to Hawaii. I never used a chainsaw. I never used a weed eater. I never even used a handsaw for anything. For the better part of my life, I was an exotic dancer, so I spent my life on stage, and that was about it. This little shack here might not look like much, but I built it all myself. It was one of the first things I put up when I came out to this property, because I needed a place to store some things that wouldn't get ruined in the rain. And everything that's cut here was cut with a handsaw. People nowadays come to Hawaii and they think they're really roughing it by having to live in some little store-bought tent for a month or so before they get their house put up with their 50 solar panels, and they really think they're roughing it. I know some people that came out here, they were too good to even use a 5-gallon bucket for the restroom. They had to get in their car and drive up to the store every day to use their toilet. Now that's pretty bad. What are you boys doing? Stop that. Don't be ugly. We've just come out of a little bit of a drought here, and it's still not completely over yet, but we actually didn't have any rain for almost 2 months. And so I'm wondering about all of the new people here, even with their great big water tanks. I wonder how many of them have just had to order water because they were not bright enough to keep an eye on their water, and realizing that the only water we get here is from God. Rainy side Hawaii can be a pretty unforgiving place, especially if you don't have proper shelter. And years and years and years and years ago, when I first came out here, there were a select few that lived out here that knew how to make it. And what's coming in here nowadays, if they had to live like myself and some of these people lived long 40 years ago, they would fold up like a cheap tent and go back to where they came from. And trust me, there are plenty of people here that have. If I had my druthers, I would rather live someplace where it actually has 4 seasons with snow and trees and actual animals, something besides rats and pigs and mongoose and cane toads. But this is where I live, and I know how to live here. And it took me a little while to learn how to live here. Living rainy side Hawaii is a real learning curve. You can't store your food like most everybody else does. You can't do a lot of things that most everybody else does. And people are just too used to turning on a light switch and being able to do their laundry when they want to, being able to take a shower when they want to, flush the toilet when they want to. People take everything for granted nowadays, and they still take it for granted because 40 years ago there weren't the solar systems that are available now. And if you were lucky enough to find one in Hawaii, well, good for you. And I actually had to live off grid because, like I said, we didn't have the power poles up in my neighborhood for at least 6-7 years that I was here. And even then, I still couldn't afford to have the electric line brought in. And I didn't have a generator either. I had quite a few kerosene lanterns and a 12-volt battery and a 12-volt water pump and my arms and legs. I did dishes by bailing water, and I did my laundry by bailing water. And before I got a battery, could afford a battery and a 12-volt pump, I bailed my water for my bath. It was quite a while before I could actually afford to get a real stove with an oven. I remember one year I baked a ham on an old tire rim that I wrapped the ham with a lot of different layers of tinfoil and just kept turning it and turning it and turning it, and it came out to be a really nice ham. And it's nice to have all the conveniences and stuff, but it's also a tragedy that so many people don't have a clue of what to do without them, and they just fall apart. And I think it's a real big learning curve for a lot of people, and it should be something that's actually mandatory. So if you really think you're living off grid with all the modern equipment and everything that you got with your solar panels and your inverters and you're this and you're that, well, you're no hero, because the first time all that breaks down, you're going to go running to your person that you got it from and have it fixed right away, because you wouldn't be able to survive. Uh, Pretty much, I know if you couldn't survive a month living in a temporary little place while you got your house built, I doubt very seriously if you could know what to do with yourself for a whole year or 2 years or 8 years living with nothing. Having this chest water cooler uh, was my refrigerator. When I would go to town to get my groceries once a month, I would get me um, 2 pieces of block ice and put in there, and then by the time it would melt, if I had any milk or anything that would spoil, then it would just be too bad. This here was my big concrete sink that was given to me by this Chinese couple that I used to do work for up in Volcano, and it only weighs about 300 pounds, but I did my dishes and my laundry in here for quite some time. Nikki got what for? He tried to catch himself a lizard and it's got a hold of him. Ha ha ha! Well, that's what you get. They bite too. No, don't hurt him. Gets pretty bad when you have to rescue your cat from a lizard. Now I just have to make sure that he gets away. He's over there. I'll have to move him. Come on, little lizard. It's okay. No. He gonna bite this? This one's a real biter. Well, at least it saved his life. So now I'm gonna take him and move him. Well, I got him safely moved to a big leaf here, but he's still clutching his little branch. But maybe little Nicky Poo won't be so anxious to chase lizards anymore. And so while I've come a long way from kerosene lanterns and Trojan batteries, I still miss my living in my tent. I was way happier when I lived in my tent. So for you people that really think you've accomplished something by having a bulldozer come in and bulldoze a house pad for you and bought all your solar equipment and your big water catchment tank and your big truck to haul everything, if you really think that you're living a really rugged lifestyle, well, I got news for you. And I doubt that very many people, men included, could live the way that I know how to live and had to live for a very long time. And if I had to do it, I could go back to it again. So anyway, I hope everybody's well. Bye-bye.